Vikings versus Ireland, 1014 AD. The Battle of Clontarf, and the king who fought as if the gods themselves had stepped onto the shore. This is the day Ireland tried to break the Norse grip forever, and the day the Sea Kings came to decide whether Dublin would rule the island, or burn with it. Dawn crawls over the coast near Dublin. The tide is low, the air sharp with salt, and the ground ahead is a patchwork of wet sand, reed beds, and open fields that will soon be trampled into mud. On one side stands an aging High King, Brian Boru, past 70, his hair white, his name already legend. On the other side, Norse warbands, and their Irish allies, tighten shields and sharpen axes, led by men who believe their fate was written in steel and omen. Before nightfall, perhaps 10,000 men will collide here, one of the largest battles ever fought on Irish soil. But here is the quick fact that changes everything. The Vikings at Clontarf were not just raiders. Many had lived in Ireland for generations, married into its clans, and now fought as much for Irish thrones as for Norse ones. This is not a simple foreign invasion. It is a civil war wearing a foreign mast. And as the tide begins to turn, a single decision made far from the front line will decide whether victory becomes salvation, or a curse that outlives the king who wins it. Ireland has never been a single blade. It is a bundle of blades, bound together by need, tradition, and fear, and always in danger of snapping apart. In the centuries before Clontarf, the island is a quilt of rival kingdoms: Munster in the south, Leinster in the east, Connaught in the west, Ulster in the north, each ruled by its own dynasty, each guarded by its own law, pride, and old blood. High kings exist, yes, but high kingship is more weather than throne. It comes, it goes, it is respected until it is resisted. An ambitious man can hold it for a time. No man can hold it without war. Into this fractured world, the longships first slide like knives into the bays. The Norse arrive in waves from the late 8th century onward, not as a single army, but as hungry kingdoms of the sea. They raid, then winter, then build. Camp becomes fortress. Fortress becomes town. Town becomes power. Dublin rises not from a single conquest, but from 100 landings. A place where the river Liffey meets the sea, and wealth can be lifted directly from the throat of Ireland. By the 10th century, Dublin is not a scar. It is a beating heart of trade, slavery, shipbuilding, and mercenary gold. Norse kings rule there, but their roots are already tangled with Irish soil. Their children speak both languages. Their swords serve whoever pays or promises most. In Munster, far from Dublin's shadow, a boy named Brian is born into the D.L. Gacy, a rising clan in a province dominated by older powers. His youth is marked by fire. His elder brother Mathgamain fights to pry Munster from the grasp of rivals. Viking raiders from Limerick cut through the Shannon like wolves through a fold. Brian learns war early, not as a ceremony, but as survival. He learns the taste of defeat, the geometry of ambush, the patience required to wait in forests while enemies pass, and the cruelty of reprisals that follow failure. And he learns something else, something rare in a land of feuding kings: how to turn victory into loyalty instead of further rebellion. When Mathgamain is betrayed and killed by treachery, Brian does not simply avenge him. He reshapes the map. He strikes the Viking seat at Limerick and smashes its power. He bends rival clans under treaties that feel like iron. He rewards friends and cages enemies in a politics that understands a simple truth: no spear is as sharp as the promise of safety under your banner. The south becomes his base, not because Munster loves him, but because Munster fears being without him. Yet to climb toward high kingship, Brian must look east. Dublin stands like a bright coin in the mouth of Leinster, and Leinster is ruled by male Morda MacMachada, a king proud enough to resent any man who expects one knee instead of two. Leinster has always been restless under high kings. Its roads lead to Dublin. Its fortunes rise and fall with Norse wealth. To male Morda, Dublin is not a foreign nest. It is a partner, sometimes a rival, often a tool, always a doorway to power that Munster cannot easily reach. Then there is Sitrick, Silkbird King of Dublin, a man with one foot on the sea and another on the land. His father was Norse. His mother was Irish. His city thrives on trade and war in equal measure. Sitrick understands that Ireland's divisions are Dublin's armor. As long as kings fight kings, Dublin can bargain, hire, and survive. A united Ireland would press on his walls like a closing hand. Brian Boru does something that feels almost impossible. He does not conquer Ireland in one thunderclap, he squeezes it, year after year, treaty after treaty, hostage after hostage. He marches into Leinster not merely to burn it, but to make it pay. He captures Dublin, not to erase it, but to leash it. The old High King, Miles Secnail of Meath, yields the title, after pressure and persuasion, that arrives at his gates. Armed feet. By 1002, Brian is recognized as Ardrí High King, a thing no man from the Diogc should have been, a thing no man should have been allowed to become. His rule is hard, but it is also strangely modern. He builds churches, supports monasteries, controls trade routes, and tries to make a single kingdom from a set of warring traditions. He marries into alliances. One of his wives is Gormlaith, a woman of Leinster royalty, and sister to Maelmorda. She is also Sitric Silkbird's mother. It is a marriage meant to seal the cracks in Ireland through blood, but blood does not always seal. Sometimes it stains. The ties that connect these families are the same ties that will strangle them. For a while, the net holds. Dublin pays tribute. Leinster stays within the fence. The other provinces balance their resentments against the undeniable stability Brian brings. Cattle herds grow. Monasteries rebuild. Roads become safer. But peace is not silence. It is a low drumbeat of grudges waiting for a louder rhythm. Maelmorda feels the leash more than anyone. Leinster is rich enough to hate being ordered. And there are small humiliations that harden into hatred. One story told later says Brian's men mocked Maelmorda with a satchel, perhaps a trivial insult, perhaps a deliberate shaming. Whether the incident happened exactly as told matters less than what it represents. Leinster believes Munster has become arrogant. Maelmorda believes Brian treats him as subordinate rather than partner. And Gormlaith, caught between brothers, sons, and a domineering husband, becomes a whisper in the dark, turning private resentments into public resolve. Sitric Silkbird, too, sees danger in Brian's success. Dublin's tribute is heavy. Its freedom is narrow. The city is wealthy, but wealth under a high king is not wealth that can choose its own future. Sitric can endure being a vassal. What he cannot endure is the idea that his sons will be vassals forever. So the East begins to plot in the oldest Irish way, not through open rebellion at first, but through alliances. Leinster reaches out across the sea, to the Norse world that Dublin itself once ruled with confidence. Messages travel to the Orkneys, to the Hebrides, to the Isle of Man, to Norway's roaming warlords. They speak a language those men understand. There is silver here, glory here, a chance to carve your name into a land already famous for riches. They also speak a darker language. This is a holy war of sorts, a clash of pride and of gods. The Norse are promised a battlefield where ravens will feast and songs will be made. The Irish rebels are promised a future without Brian's shadow. Meanwhile, Brian knows something is moving beneath the surface. He is old, but not blind. He has spent a lifetime reading the tremor of rebellion in the way tributee arrives late, in the way hostages grow restless, in the way smaller kings begin to look sideways instead of forward. He responds as a commander responds. He applies pressure. He demands more tribute. He tightens control over Dublin. He expects obedience because obedience has always come when he has demanded it. But age can turn strength into certainty, and certainty can miss the moment when obedience has already soured into defiance. In 1013. The fracture becomes a break. Leinster rises in open revolt. Sitric throws Dublin behind it. Their banners do not look like the banners of hopeless rebellion. They look like the banners of men who believe help is coming. Because help is coming. Across the grey water, Viking warbands assemble under famous names. Sigurd of Orkney, a hard, ambitious earl, gathers his men with a promise of kingdom. Broder of Man, a warrior with a reputation like a storm front, arrives with ships said to be black as crows. These leaders are not footnotes. They are the sharp edge of the Norse world. Men who do not sail to die for another man's pride. Unless the reward is worth the blood, Ireland feels the pull of this approaching tide. Smaller kings weigh their options. Some fear Brian's power. Some fear Norse dominance more. Some want to see which way the wind blows before they commit their spears. Brian calls his levies. Munster answers, and so do many who have prospered. Under him, his son Machard, fierce and proven, takes command of the field force. Brian himself remains the heart of the campaign, not because he will swing an axe on the front line, but because every man in his host draws courage from the idea that the High King is still among them. On the eve of 1014, the armies begin to close around Dublin. Brian marches north from Munster, his allies from Connaught and other regions join in fragments. Mair Secnel of Meath, the displaced High King, hovers on the edge of loyalty and opportunity. A man who hates Brian's rise, but hates Leinster. Betrayed is a crucial piece on the board, and no one is sure which way he will fall when the battle begins. And in Dublin, Sihtric watches the sea. He expects the Norse reinforcements to arrive in time. He expects Mael Morda to hold the land approaches. He expects Brian to come like a thunderstorm and break himself against walls of steel. But the coast does not care what men expect. It cares about tides, and dawn, and the slow turning of fortune. Storm over Dublin. The morning before battle does not arrive with thunder. It arrives with a dull, patient grey, the kind that makes men look older than they are. Along Brian's line, the host wakes to wet grass and stiff joints, to the faint taste of smoke from last night's fires. Helmets are pulled on in silence. Belts are tightened. A man checks the rawhide wrap on his spear not because it is loose, but because his hands need something to do while his heart tries to climb out of his chest. Not beyond them, Dublin sits behind its walls like a watcher who dares the world to blink first. From the city's ramparts, Sihtric Silkboard sees the opposing camps spread along the flats. He can make out banners by their colors and shapes even at this distance. Munster standards, familiar and hated. The dark shapes of Connaught men, who came because they feared Brian less than they feared what Dublin might become if it won. And on the far edge, the uncertain presence of Meath, Mael, Secnel's force, lingering like a half-drawn blade. Sihtric claws at that uncertainty in his mind. If Meath joins Brian, the Eastern Coalition will be pressed hard. If Meath stays neutral, the field becomes a coin toss. If Meath turns on Brian, Sihtric does not let himself finish the thought. What matters now is the sea. What matters now is that the sea does not betray him, because the plan was simple when it was spoken. In warm halls, with mead and vows laid down like stones, Leinster would hold the land, Dublin would be the anvil, and the Norse from overseas would be the hammer. Brian would have numbers, but he would be fighting two wars at once. One against Mael Morda in front of him, another against fear behind him. The hammer would fall, the High King would crack, and Ireland would shatter back into the old pattern of rival kings that could be bought, bullied, or burned. Yet plans do not march, men march. And men arrive late, or early, or not at all. Out beyond the harbour mouth, sails appear like black gull wings against the stacked clouds. Word runs through Dublin first, then spreads to Leinster lines. The foreign fleets are here. Long ships nosing through chop, crews braced tight at the oars. The sound of their approach is not a roar, but a low, wooden creak, a breathing rhythm, that makes Irish warriors glance nervously toward the horizon. These are not the local Norse who trade in Dublin's markets. These are sea wolves with no roots here, only hunger and reputation. Dutch Sigurd of Orkney steps ashore in mail that gleams like cold scales. He is tall, broad, his eyes the pale blue of deep water. His men carry a banner said to be sacred, a raven that promises victory to those who follow it, but death to the one who bears it. Broder of Man comes after, harder to read, wearing dark armor and a cloak heavy with salt. His followers look as if they have been sculpted from ship timber and storm. They kneel in the sand, touch the earth, and rise without speaking. And discipline is its own threat. When Mael Morda meets them, he is a king, trying to show no fear before guests who might become masters. He offers welcome, tribute, the promise of spoils. Sigurd smiles the way a man smiles before he takes what he was promised anyway. Broder listens with a stillness that feels like a trap. The coalition now looks like what Sihtric imagined. Leinster blades on the land, Dublin's walls behind, and fresh Norse steel to stiffen the centre. Across the flats, Mashard, son of Brian, watches the arrival and feels the weight of it settle on his shoulders. He is not old. He has a warrior's face, lean and sharp, the kind that looks carved to survive hard decisions. He knows these foreign warbands will fight differently than Irish levies. They will not tire as quickly. They will not break simply because a local king falters. And their axes can split a shield like a loaf dot, so he moves before the enemy can move. Before Sigurd and Broder have even finished establishing their lines, Marshad shifts his host closer to the shore. He chooses ground where the sand gives way. Two firmer flats, where the tide's reach becomes a living boundary. Some of Brian's captains urge a strike at Dublin itself, to take the city and force the rebels to come to them. Marshad refuses. A siege would bleed time. A siege would let the Norse raiders rear. or let Maelsak now decide the day without him. Here, on open ground, he can force the battle to be about courage and cohesion, not patience. Brian, in his tent, accepts his son's judgment. He has seen too many younger commanders die from the arrogance of ignoring the sea, the weather, or the human soul. His age is a lantern now. It does not light every step, but it shows where cliffs usually hide. The lines assemble slowly, as if the island itself is reluctant to make this choice. Irish warbands gather under their provincial kings, shields painted and scarred, spears bristling in thick ranks. Norse infantry forms tighter, heavier blocks. Their round shields like overlapping coins, their axes held low for the first rush. Leinster men press into the gaps, burning with the fury of men who are fighting neighbors and calling them enemies to make it easier to kill. When the sun finally breaks through a slit in the sky, it does not feel like blessing. It feels like exposure. Every man can see the other now. Every man can see the shape of his own possible death. And then something happens that no one on the field can control. The tide moves. It creeps inward almost politely at first, darkening the sand, filling it with suck and slip. The waterline inches closer to the Norse ships drawn up behind their host. It is not high yet, it is not frightening yet, but officers on both sides notice it, and their faces tighten. A rising tide is not just water, it is a clock with teeth. The first clash comes like a door kicked open. Trumpets are rare here. The signal is the roar of men and the percussion of feet. Irish spears surge forward in long waves, driving at the Norse center, while Mershard leads Munster spear straight into Sigurd's line. The impact is brutal but brief, shields shuddering, spearheads catching, men falling, the whole line bending, without breaking. For a heartbeat, it looks like the Norse wall will hold and then roll forward with its heavier weight. But Mershard had not come to test their wall. He had come to tilt it. He orders a feint on the Norse right, drawing Brodier's men toward a fight that seems open, then snaps his left wing into the gap it creates. Irish warriors flood into that seam, hacking at flanks, dragging shields sideways, turning the Norse block into a staggered, unstable shape. The move is so fast that even Leinster commanders stare, unsure whether they are watching a mistake or a masterpiece. Sigurd responds like a man who has survived storms bigger than this. He drives his standard-bearer forward and pushes into Merkit's center, trying to split Munster from its allies. The Raven banner flaps above the crush. Men go to it because they must, because they fear the promise tied to it, because their honor will not let them yield ground while it flies. For a while the battle becomes a grinding contest of breath and grit, a place where courage does not feel heroic, only necessary. The Irish surge, the Norse absorb, then shove back. Leinster spears find Irish throats. Norse axes find Irish ribs. A man's world narrows to the rim of his shield and the man trying to breach it then. On the far side of the field, the uncertainty of Meath sharpens into a blade. Mayo Secknail's troops move not into Brian's line, not into Sid, but toward Dublin's approaches, cutting at the rebel rear in quick, brutal strikes. It is not a full commitment, not yet, but it is enough to jar Leinster's nerve. Some of Mayor Mordeh's captains peel away to respond. The coalition's neat shape begins to fray. Sitric, watching from the wall, feels his mouth go dry. This was the fear. This was the question he could not answer. Meath had chosen neither side openly, and by choosing neither, it threatens both. Yet just as that worry blooms, another sight freezes his blood colder than the sea wind. The tide has climbed higher. The longships are rocking now, deeper in water, their landing points narrowing. Men in the Norse rear glance back, not in panic, but in calculation. They begin to understand what ground they are standing on. If they are pushed too far toward the shore at the wrong hour, they will have no dry path to their ships, and the sea will not negotiate. On the field, Mershard senses the same truth. He does not need a messenger. He can read it in the way the enemy starts to fight as if their backs are suddenly against a cliff. He presses harder, trying to drive them seawards before they realize they must pull away. The Irish line, re-energized by Meath's pressure on the rear, leans in like a closing gate. The Norse center wavers. Sigurd's banner sways above a knot of desperate men. Brodier's warband fights with the snarl of cornered wolves. Mael Morda throws his own household guard into the breach, personally stepping forward to steady the line. The battle is now balanced on a breath. And then the sea breathes again. Water slides into the lower flats behind the Norse, cutting off the easiest retreat. It is still possible to reach the ships, but only by narrow, muddy ways that shrink with every minute. There is a way out, yes, but it is a way that demands choice, now, not later. Sigurd looks over his shoulder once, Broder does the same. Neither says a word, yet their men understand. A force that came for glory has discovered it may need to fight. For survival, that the question hanging over the battlefield is no longer who is braver, it is who understands the trap first, and who dares to risk everything to spring it. The day of the raven steel does not announce itself with poetry, it announces itself with breath that turns to steam inside a helmet, with the wet popper feet tearing free of mud, with the animal grunt of men who have stopped being farmers and sons and become weight behind a shield. Along the shoreline at Clontarf, the two armies crash again, and this time the impact feels final, like a door slamming on a world that will not reopen. Murshad drives into the Norse center as if he means to punch through the sea itself. He is everywhere at once in the minds of his men, a moving beacon of iron and voice. He hacks down a mailed warrior, then steps over him without looking, because looking costs time. His Munstermen follow in a wedge, shoulder to shoulder, spears, thrusting low beneath shields, aiming for bellies and thighs where armor is weakest. The Norse answer with a dense tour and the chopping rhythm of axes. Each swing meant to break a shield rim and the arm behind it in one bite. For an hour, the field becomes a grindstone. The Irish push in waves. The Norse absorb, then shove back. With slow, brutal Sturgis men fall and are trampled into the earth until their bodies become part of the footing. A warrior's world shrinks to the circle of his shield and the face in front of it. Names are shouted and drowned. Orders are heard and misunderstood. Nothing is clean now. Nothing is certain. Yet in the middle of this chaos there are moments of terrifying clarity. Sigurd of Orkney steps forward under the raven banner, his mayor, dark with splatter, and carves into the Munster lion wherever it seems soft. His men tighten around him. They do not fight like raiders. They fight like a machine hammered into shape by 100 sea battles. Leinster warriors dart in and out of the gaps, slashing at Irish flanks, trying to pull the wedge apart. Mel, Morda household guard, forms a rough spine behind the Norse, holding the line with the grim pride of men who know their king is watching. Then the tide steals. Another yard dart. At first it is merely a strip of water glinting behind the Norse rear. Then it becomes a shallow lake, swallowing the easy track to the ships. The longboats now bob like trapped animals. The men guarding them start to wade, hauling them higher, cursing as the mud clutches at their calves. By the time the message reaches the front line, it has changed from a concern into a threat. The sea is rising fast enough that retreat will soon mean running through water with armor dragging you under. The Norse commanders feel it like ice in the spine. Sigurd's eyes flick toward the shore more often. Brodir's warband begins to edge sideways, seeking firmer ground. A few units at the rear peel off without orders. It is not flight yet. It is instinct. But instinct spreads. Murshad senses the shift and gives no mercy to it. He orders his right wing to press harder, to bend the Norse toward the waterline. The Irish obey with a kind of furious relief. Every man knows what it means to trap a foe. Against the sea, it means the battle can end, not by killing every enemy, but by letting the tide do the last work. Sigurd understands the danger and tries to answer it with audacity. He gathers a knot of his best fighters and hurls them straight at Murshad, aiming for the head rather than the body. If he can kill Brian's son, Munster's wedge will lose its spine. It is a gamble made in the narrow breaths between one wave and the next. The collision of their households is like a smaller battle inside the battle. Shields split, spears snap. The men around Murshad die in a tight ring, not because they are weaker, but because they refuse to step back. Murshad himself takes a cut to the thigh that sears hot through cloth and flesh. He staggers, then roars for his guard to hold, and steps forward again as if pain is an insult he will not accept. Sigurd meets him in the press. For a blink, their eyes lock through the chaos. Two men who have taken so much from the world now measure what it will take to take the last thing from each other. Somewhere in that knot of bodies, the raven banner dips. The bearer has taken a spear in the ribs. Sigurd throws a hand out to catch the standard, as men shout in alarm. The raven is not just cloth, it is a promise, and also a curse. To let it fall is to let the promise die. Sigurd lifts it, and the moment he does, the men closest to him flinch as, if they have watched fate choose its victim, they fight harder for him anyway. Murshad's blade finds a gap. Sigurd's shield turns it. Another Irish spear slides under Sigurd's arm. A Norse axe cleaves the spear in two. The ring tightens. The air stinks of sweat and blood and churned kelp. Then a Munster veteran, half-blind from gore, drives his spear at Sigurd's side. The point takes him low, where Mel doesn't fully cover. Sigurd jerks, drops the banner for the space of a breath, and in that breath, Mashard surges forward like a wolf that has smelled weakness. Sigurd falls beneath the crush, and the raven goes down with him. The ripples of that fall travel faster than any runner. The Norse center shudders. Men who have never met Sigurd feel their knees soften. The raven's promise is inverted. A banner that was supposed to guarantee victory now feels like a lid closing on doom. Some units fight on grimly, but others begin to pull away, glancing constantly toward the shore where the water is now abroad. Glittering knife. Mael Morda sees the fracture and tries to weld it shut. He charges into the slackening Norse line, shouting oaths, striking down anyone who steps back. His presence buys time, but it also drags him deeper into the fight. He is no longer the king directing from safety. He is a warrior standing in the maw of the Irish wedge. His guard follows because they must. Leinster's fate is tied to him, like a rope in floodwater. For a few heartbeats, it looks as if Mael Morda will reverse the collapse. He rallies a counterthrust, slamming into Murchad's left, driving Irishmen sideways, spoiling their push toward the sea. The Norse, who still have nerve, seize the chance and surge with him. The line stiffens. The battle steadies. Sitrick, watching from Dublin, grips the parapet so hard his knuckles pale. This might still be rescued. This might still be turned, but that hope is thin as mist. The tide is now high enough that Norse warriors who do break away do not find dry sand behind them. They find water at the knee, then at the thigh. They wade, then stumble, then swim in mail that wants to drown them. A few reach boats, many do not. Panic, when it comes, does not come from fear of Irish steel. It comes from the sudden understanding that the sea has joined the battle, and it has no side other than its own. Broder of Man sees it and makes his decision. He does not retreat out of cowardice. He retreats because he intends to live to fight. Again, he orders his men toward a narrow path of higher ground leading to their ships. The maneuver is disciplined, but it is visible, and visibility is deadly. Irish warriors scream and pursue with the joy of wolves scenting blood. Brodio's rear guard turns to hold them off, by a minute at the cost of lives. In the crush. Mael Morda's guard is dragged further from the shore, deeper into the Irish press. His men fall around him. He keeps swinging. He keeps shouting. He refuses to believe Leinster will be buried here under Munster boots. But the wedge closes in. Murchad, limping, blood soaking down his leg, sees the Leinster king ahead like a black rock in a whitewater stream. He calls for his men to take him. They surge. Mael Morda is struck once, then twice. He drops to one knee, then rises, then is swallowed again by Bodizu. When he finally falls for good, the news hits Leinster like a spear in the gut. Their line buckles. Their war drains away. Men who fought with fury a moment ago begin to flee toward Dublin, only to find Dublin's gates shut. Sitrick unwilling to open them and let panic infect his city, so Leinster runs toward the shore instead, and the shore is already disappearing. By late afternoon, the battle is no longer two armies meeting. It is one army trying to finish a kill and another trying to escape the sea. Irish warriors press the broken Norse and Leinster remnants into narrowing corridors of ground. The water rises at their backs, bodies float, shields drift. A man may survive steel and still die with lungs full of brine. And through it all, Murchad fights on, refusing to stop even when his wound weakens him, because he knows the worst moment in any battle is not the first clash, but the last hour. When victory seems close enough to touch, and a tired army can still lose it by relaxing a heartbeat too soon. Yet a battle this fast always has more than one front. Behind the Irish host, near the quiet place where Brian's tent stands, the small band moving through the scrub has reached the edge of the camp. They are soaked from wading the tidal channels. Their blades are wrapped, their breath controlled. They are not running, they are hunting. A sentry turns, sees a shadow, opens his mouth to call out. A knife finds his throat before sound escapes. Another guard is pulled into the brush and silenced. The killer's leader, a Norse warrior with salt-crusted hair and eyes that have never learned, pithy gestures toward the tent where the High King prays inside. Brian kneels on a folded cloak, lips moving in a prayer meant for a world of saints, not ravens. He can still hear the battle, distant but constant, like cliffs breaking in a storm. He does not know who is winning yet. He only knows that if his men fail, Ireland fails with them. He closes his eyes. Outside, the tent flap stirs. The king in the tent, the flap lifts as softly as a breath. For a heartbeat, the world inside the tent is still. A single oil lamp trembles on the ground. Shadows swim across the canvas walls. Brian Boru rises from his knees slowly, as if time itself has thickened around him. Age has not bent him into weakness, but it has given him the shape of a root that has held through many winters. His sword rests nearby, not for show, but because even prayer in this land has always lived beside steel. The first man through the opening is not Irish. His hair is braided tight, his beard stiff with salt. He carries no shield, no banner, only a long blade slick with recent work. Behind him, two more figures step into the lamplight, eyes hard, shoulders hunched, moving like men who have already accepted that they might not leave this place alive. Brian does not shout. He does not call for guards. The sound of battle outside is too vast for any cry inside to matter. He reaches for his weapon and stands fully, filling the tent with a calm that feels heavier than armor. So, he says quietly, and the word is like a stone dropped into a deep well. The lead attacker smiles without humor. He had expected a frightened old man. What he sees is a king who has walked too far to flinch now. The Norseman raises his blade. Brian lifts his sword. They meet in a space barely wide enough to swing. The first clash is savage, metal on metal, lamp oil shuddering from the tremor. Brian's arms are not as quick as they once were, but they are steady. He turns the first strike aside and steps in close to keep the enemy from using reach. The second attacker tries to cut for Brian's ribs. Brian twists, takes the blow on the flat of his blade, and answers with a short, brutal chop that forces the man back into the tent wall. Outside, no one sees this hidden war. Outside, thousands are dying in the open, under the sky and the rising tide. Cheer under canvas. The fate of their victory is being weighed with 3 blades and an old heart. Brian's foot slips on the cloak beneath him. The lead Norseman lunges. The point bites into Brian's shoulder, shallow but hot. Brian grunts a sound of anger more than pain and hammers the man's wrist with his pummel. The attacker staggers, surprise flashing across his face. He did not expect strength like this. He did not expect rage. Brian presses, driving the man toward the opening. But the second Norseman moves in, low and fast, hooking Brian's sword arm. The third raises his blade for the finishing cut. In that instant, time narrows to a single choice. Brian drops his weight, letting the hook pull his arm down instead of fighting it. The third man's strike whistles over his head and bites into the tent pole. Brian's free hand snatches a spear leaning against the canvas, a weapon meant for a guard, not a king, and he drives it upward into the attacker's belly. The Norseman folds, eyes wide, breath gone, and falls in a wet collapse. The other two hesitate. Not long, only long enough for Brian to step back, blood running warm down his shoulder, breath roughening. The lead attacker snarls and surges again. Brian meets him with a thrust that forces the Norseman's blade high. Their faces are close now, close enough that Brian can smell the sea on him. The lead attacker spits a curse and slashes sideways. Brian catches the blow near his hilt. The impact jolts through bone. The old king's sword dips. The Norseman sees the opening and drives in. A shout cracks the air behind him. An Irish guard. Late and furious, tears into the tent. Spear leveled. The lead attacker twists too slowly. The spear takes him through the side. He gasps, shocked, not by death but by the fact that death was not his to deliver. He drops to his knees in the sanded earth of the tent. Brian steps forward and ends it cleanly, almost mercifully, because his mind is still on the battle outside. There is no room left for anger that lingers. The final Norseman bolts not toward the opening, but sideways through the torn canvas, vanishing into scrub and smoke. The guard moves to pursue. Brian grips his arm. No, Brian says, voice low. Let him carry the tale. The guard stares, half in disbelief. Brian releases him and sinks back to his knees. His breath is short now. Blood pools at his side. He holds his sword across his lap like a relic. He returns to prayer, not because he thinks prayer will stop what is coming, but because prayer is what a man does when his body begins to feel less like armor and more like sand. Outside, the battle is entering its last, brutal hour. Mashard still stands in the churned flat, but he stands as a man made of exhaustion and will. His thigh wound has stiffened. every step a bite of fire. His helm is dented, his shield hacked to splinters. Men call his name and he barely hears it. He has passed beyond the frontier where a commander calculates. Now he is the point of a spear that has no choice but to thrust. The Norse center is a ruin. Sigurd is dead. Male Morda is dead. Leinster's discipline has dissolved into small knots of fighters sprinting toward any patch of escape. Brodier's men are halfway to their boat, but half a path is not a path when the sea keeps swallowing it. A fresh surge of Irish warriors catches Brodier's rear guard. The Norse turn and fight with desperate precision, laying bodies in tight piles to delay the pursuit. Broder himself cuts a line through the press, face unreadable, moving like a shark through red water. He is trying to reach the narrow ridge that still sits above the tide. He is trying to live, and he almost does. Marshad sees him. He does not know Brodier's name. He does not need to. He sees a leader dragging men with him, a leader who could regroup, raid, return to Ireland in another season with the wound of today turned into vengeance. Marshad gathers his last reserve and throws it in front of Brodier's escape. The clash is violent and brief. Irish spears jab, trying to halt the Norse wall. Brodier's men hack them apart step by step, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the glimmering boats beyond. Marshad forces his way to the front, raising his sword. Brodo meets him. Their blades bite. The sound is different from earlier fights. It is slower, heavier, as if the air itself has thickened with fatigue. Marshad swings high. Brodo blocks, cuts low. Marshad's knee buckles, not from the blow, but from pain finally demanding its due. He grits his teeth and resays again. His men crowd in behind him, refusing to let him fall alone. Brodo tries to break through anyway. He knows the sea is minutes from sealing the ridge. He knows every second spent here is a second stolen from survival. He lunges to finish Marshad. Marshad catches a strike on his ruined shield, steps inside the Norseman's reach, and drives his sword forward. The edge slips beneath Brodier's armor. Brodo jerks back, eyes flashing with disbelief, then fury. He slams his elbow into Murchard's face, cracking bone, and rips free. Blood pours down his side. He does not fall. He does not even slow. He turns toward the ridge and runs. Marshad staggers after him, not fast enough. The world swims. He takes another step, then another, and a Norse axe from the side finds his chest. Marshad goes down into the mud, with a sound like a man sitting hard, almost casual. His eyes are open. His lips move once, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a name. Then the line closes overhead, and the battle continues, without the man who carried it. News spreads through the Irish host like a cold wind. Brian's son is dead. Their leading sword is gone. For a moment, the push falters. It should not matter now. The Norse are broken. The shore is drowning them. But men are not machines. They feel the loss as a hollow opening in the chest. Yet, the next breath brings fury instead of fear. Munster warriors scream and drive forward with a grief that has nowhere else to go. They batter the Norse remnants into the tide. Men drown in mail. Others are cut down trying to climb onto boats that are already pulling away. And on Dublin's walls, Citric watches the field become a graveyard that moves. He sees Broder escape with a handful of men, bloodied but alive. He sees the rest of the coalition swallowed by steel and sea. He sees banners falling, and with them, a future he had dared to picture too clearly. The sun dips low, the water shines red. The fighting thins into scattered pockets, then into silence, broken only by the moan of injured men and the hiss of waves. Through Reeds. Island has one Clontarf, but who has paid for it? Back near the Irish camp, the guard who had reached Brian's tent now runs to find Marshad. He finds only bodies and churned mud. He finds victory without its commander. Panic claws at his throat. He turns, sprinting toward the tent. Inside, Brian is still kneeling. His shoulders sag. His sword rests across his lap. The lamp gutted out a while ago. Light now spills in through torn canvas, pale and weak. The guard bursts in, breathless, and Stubbs dead. Brian does not look up. Tell me, he whispers, voice almost gone. Did we hope? The guard swallows hard, tasting smoke and sorrow. Yes, my king, he says. We held. Brian closes his eyes, and for a moment his face softens. Relief moves through him like a final tide going out. He bows his head lower. And outside, beyond the tent, footsteps approach again, heavier, slower, more deliberate than the first killers. The guard turns toward the sound in a fading light. A lone figure steps from the scrub, limping, drenched in blood that is not all his own. his eyes burning with something worse than defeat. Brodor has come back. After the tide, Brodor walks as if every step is a decision against pain. His mail hangs in broken pieces. His side is a dark wet ruin where Murktid's blade kissed him. Yet his eyes are alive, bright with the cold fury of a man who has outlived his army and cannot forgive the world for it. He has come back through the dying light, not because he thinks he can win this war. He has come back because there is one thing left that can still make defeat feel like something else. The Irish guard steps in front of the tent opening, spear leveled, hands shaking from exhaustion and shock. He is young enough to still believe a single weapon can change what the day has already decided. Back he spits, voice cracking. Backseat. Brodor does not slow. He does not raise his weapon yet. He looks past the guard, into the torn canvas, toward the shadow where the old king kneels. The guard lunges. The spear point skims Brodor's ribs, catching mail and flesh. Brodor grunts, not from surprise but from irritation. He knocks the spear aside with a short swipe, steps inside the guard's reach, and brings his axe down with the economy of a man who has killed too many times to waste motion. The guard collapses at the threshold, his body folding like a dropped cloak. The tent goes quiet again, except for Brian's breathing. The High King does not rise. He does not scramble for his sword. He turns, slowly, as if he is turning to a visitor he has expected. His face is ash pale now. Blood has dried on his shoulder in a dark crust. The lamp is dead. Only the grey spill of evening lights the canvas, making Brodor's silhouette long and warped along the walls. "So you made it through the tide," Brian says. Brodor's mouth twitches. Maybe a smile. Maybe a snarl. Not through it. Because of it. He steps closer. His boots leave wet prints on the canvas floor. He smells of salt and iron and the sourness of a wound that knows it is deep. Brian's sword lies across his lap. He rests his hands on it gently, like a man holding a sleeping child. There is no fear in his posture. There is only the calm of a commander who has already paid every coin he can pay. Brodor lifts his axe. Brian tries to rise. His legs do not answer quickly enough. He is old, and he is bleeding, and his strength has been poured into a lifetime of marching. He gets halfway up, braced on one knee, making himself tall in spirit if not in body. The axe falls. It takes Brian in the neck and shoulder with a sound that is almost soft. The old king sags forward, his hands tightening reflexively on his sword, then loosening. His breath leaves him in a long, thin exhale, as if he is letting go of something heavy at last. For a moment he remains upright, held by will alone. Then he tips sideways and lies still among the folds of canvas and cloak. Brodor stands over him, shaking, not from grief, from the draining away of the last purpose that kept him walking. He stares down at the face that had terrified the East for a decade. The face that had tried to make a single island from a broken one, and he knows he has killed more than a man. He has killed a story in the very hour it became legend. Outside, the tide keeps whispering in the reeds. The sea does not cheer, it does not mourn, it simply moves. Brodor stumbles out into the fading evening, leaving the tent behind him like a seal of doom. He does not make it far. Irish warriors, returning from the shore in ragged victory, see him and surge with a roar that is half triumph, half grief unwinding. He is cut down in steps and stabs, dragged to the ground by men who do not even know his name, only that he is the last enemy still standing close enough to touch Doc. By the time full dark arrives, the battlefield is silent, for the first time in a day. Silence, after such violence, feels unnatural. Men sit among bodies that are already cooling, staring at their hands as though they belong to someone else. Some laugh in disbelief and then choke on it. Some weep without shame. Many simply stare, because the mind has no map for what comes. After surviving the end of the world, the victors begin to understand the shape of their victory. At a shore, the water has risen high enough that long sections of sand are gone. The few Norse who escaped did so in scattered boats, leaving weapons and comrades behind. More of them lie drowned than slain, their mail pulling them into the sea's mouth. The rebels of Leinster are broken so thoroughly that their dead cover the flats like a second ground. The Norse power that once anchored Dublin's ambition has been shattered in a single day. And still, the price is not finished being counted. Messengers ride through the Irish host looking for Mutt. They find him at last near the center of the churned field, his face turned toward the sky, his mouth slightly open as if he is mid-sentence. Men kneel beside him and feel a grief so sharp it tastes like metal. Mashad had been the spear that moved first and the shield that held last. Without him, victory feels suddenly hollowed, like a hall with its roof gone. Then the word spreads about Bryandor. At first, no one believes it. The High King alive in the camp is part of how men kept fighting even when their arms failed. That image cannot simply vanish. But the tent tells no lies. They find him where he fell, still kneeling as if he never stopped praying. A hush moves through the army, a hush deeper than any battle. This is the moment when men realize they can win a war and still lose the man who made the war worth winning. They lift his body at dawn. The sun rises pale and cold, and the field below it looks like a ruined harvest. The dead are gathered. The wounded are carried on doors, ripped from huts, on shields, on whatever can hold a groaning body. Priests walk among the lines, murmuring blessings over both Irish and Norse, because even enemies share the same last breath. Dublin does not open its gates in celebration. It opens them in surrender. Citric Silkbird steps out in a cloak to clean for the horror around him. His face is drawn, his eyes empty. The city is still standing, but his future is narrowed to a thin path between Irish wrath and Norse abandonment. He offers hostages, he offers tribute, he offers words that sound like loyalty but feel like survival. The Irish accept because they are too exhausted to do anything else. They did not come to burn Dublin into ash, they came to break the hand that held a knife to Ireland's throat. Yet even that breaks differently than people imagine. With Brian dead, the question of what Ireland becomes is immediately reopened. The High Kingship does not pass cleanly. There is no single heir strong enough to keep all provinces bound. Munster mourns but cannot command the island. Leinster is bruised but not erased. Meath, under Mael Secnel, quietly resumes its old prestige. Power slides back toward the old pattern, not because Brian failed, but because a single man, no matter how fierce, cannot permanently silence the hunger of rival dynasties. For the Norse in Ireland, Clontarf is not the end. It is a change of weather. Dublin remains Norse in character for generations, trading, marrying, and maneuvering through Irish politics. The Sea Kings lose the dream of ruling Ireland outright, but they do not vanish. They adapt. The Viking age here does not end in one clean sunset. It fades into something more complicated, something braided into the island's bones. And in the stories that follow, Clontarf becomes bigger than itself. To some, it is the day Ireland threw off the foreign yoke. To others, it is the day Irish kings killed each other while the sea laughed. The truth is sharper and sadder. It was a battle that saved an island from one kind of future by paying with another. It shattered a coalition that could have made Dublin the center of a Norse-Irish kingdom. It also killed the man who might have held Ireland together long enough to become something new. Brian Boru's body is carried back toward Armagh, toward the sacred places he fostered, through lands that he once forced into peace. People line the roads not with cheers, but with a stunned reverence. They look at the dead king and finally understand the weight of what he tried to do, the cost of dreaming of unity in a land raised on rivalry. He is buried with honor, but honor is not a shield against what comes next, because now the island must decide whether Clontarf was a final act of old hatred or the first step into a different kind of island. The warriors who survived limp home to farms that feel strange to them. Kings gather in halls and whisper about claims and revenge. Dublin counts its losses and wonders who will protect it when the next fleet appears on the horizon. And out there, beyond the grey water, the Norse world still turns. New earls rise, new kings hunger. They hear tales of a battle where the sea itself became a weapon, where a great high king won and died on the same day, and where Ireland proved it could bleed. Any invader who dared to step ashore, those tales will travel, they will grow teeth, and they will return one day in another form. So when you picture Clontarf, do not picture a neat ending. Picture a tide that goes out and comes back. Picture a victory written in blood that still soaks into the future. Picture an island standing over a battlefield, asking the question Brian Boru spent his life asking: can a land of many blades ever become one sword, without breaking in the forging? The sea does not answer. Not yet.